Before we begin, I just have a few important safety measures to share. All virtual participants must use a headset and microphone approved by the Parliamentary Interpretation Service. If your headset is not an approved model, it will not be interpreted. This is to assure the safety of interpreters. To avoid disruptive and potentially hazardous audio feedback that could result in injury, we ask all in-person participants to keep their earpieces away from microphones at all times. When your earpiece is not in use, please place it face down on the center of the designated sticker located on the table. These measures are in place so we can protect the health and safety of all participants, including your interpreters, and conduct our business without interruption. And I thank you all for your cooperation. So we have with us today Emergency Management Minister Eleanor Olszewski, Environment Minister Julie DeBrusen, Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Galmasti, and online we have Corey Hogan, who is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. I believe all of them have a short, emphasis on short, opening statement, and then we will have about, or at least 20 minutes for questions. We'll start in the room with one question and one follow, and then I will go online. If you are online and have a question, please use the raised hand function. And with that, over to you, Minister Olszewski.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. You know, across the country, we're already seeing communities demonstrate remarkable strength and solidarity as they recover from spring flooding and they prepare for the wildfire season. Les catastrophes liées au climat sont de plus en plus.
Climate-related disasters are becoming more frequent, severe, and costly.
It's more important than ever to be prepared to protect our loved ones and our neighbors, our homes, valuable members of our communities, etc. And fortunately, as I've already said, Canadians are a resilient people. But that resilience doesn't happen by accident. It's really strengthened by learning from the past and by taking deliberate steps to prepare for the future. And that is really what this moment requires. We know that wildfires and other disasters are more frequent, more severe, more costly, and Canadians expect their government to step up and to respond to that reality. And that's something I heard directly through last year's historic wildfire season, and certainly through our national public engagement on the future of federal emergency management, which closed at the end of March of this year. And that's really the message that I want to emphasize today. We have learned and we've adapted our approach, and we're so much more focused on preparing in advance and coordinating closely. And if we mean federal, provincial, and Indigenous communities are ready to respond together, we can get through this wildfire season. So as we heard from our tech briefing earlier this morning, the season's of course already underway with 65 active wildfires and 6 out of control across the country. So we know obviously that hot and dry weather conditions increase the risk, and above normal temperatures are expected across most regions of Canada over the next 3 months. And some regions, and most specifically Western Canada in the month of July, and more Ontario and Quebec in the month of June. Those are our worries and challenges at the present time, but we know that situation can change rapidly. And that's why preparedness matters in every jurisdiction and in every community. So I encourage all Canadians to go to getprepared.ca to learn how to protect yourself and your family, learn how to make an emergency plan and an emergency kit, and use resources like those that can be found on firesmartcanada.ca to find out how to take steps to protect your home and protect your communities from the threat of wildfire. And also, please follow local weather alerts and air advisory conditions and evacuation notices, most certainly, and instructions from local emergency authorities and officials. So at the federal level, Canada's new government is focused on what we can control, and that means taking a whole-of-government approach to protecting Canadians. And we're doing that by actively supporting evacuations, providing surge capacity for wildfire response, and taking proactive steps to reduce risks. Nous collaborons étroitement avec les provinces.
We work closely with provinces, territories, Indigenous communities, and other partners across the country.
The center of this effort is Public Safety's Government Operations Center, which operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this is the first wildfire season for that center. That facility opened, the new one that is, in November of last year. And it really helped increase our capacity to respond to disasters and to coordinate multiple and complex emergencies concurrently, and it will make a real impact this year. We've also made recent investments that I've announced lately, and a couple of the key ones are $108 million to renew the humanitarian workforce program, $55.4 million to modernize NPAS, or our emergency alerting system, and as I announced on Monday, $316 million to CIFC, the Interagency Forest Fire Center, to lease 10 additional wildfire fighting aircraft. And that's 5 water bombers and 5 heavy lift helicopters. And I was so excited to make that announcement. That's going to make a huge difference in terms of surge capacity and how we can help provinces that need equipment at a particular point in time. So, really, I can say this, our commitment to strengthening federal emergency management is ongoing. It extends beyond seasonal hazards like wildfires. We know that preparation saves lives, that no single order of government or community can do this work alone. From first responders to volunteers, Indigenous leaders, emergency teams on the ground battling flames, from provinces and territories to the federal government, we are working together to protect Canadians. Les changements
Climate change will continue to pose significant challenges to communities across the country.
By working together to prevent and prepare for, respond to and recover from these wildfires and other emergencies, we will keep Canada's communities safe and build them strong and resilient. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Julie.
Alors, bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Hello, everyone.
For being with us today. As we come together to prepare for the spring and summer months, we must also prepare for the realities of the wildfire season, as we've just heard. In recent years, wildfires have forced thousands of Canadians from their homes, destroyed infrastructure, disrupted local economies, and affected the air quality of millions across the country. Our message today for Canadians is clear. The Government of Canada is prepared, and we support you. Le changement climatique cause les saisons des feux, des forêts.
Climate change is prolonging wildfire season, and these fires are having a more destructive impact. Last year, the wildfire season was significantly hard in 2025. It was actually the second biggest wildfire season in terms of area burned. And according to Environment Canada and the Global Meteorological Agency, forecasts are pointing to a strong El Niño, which can create conditions that can lead to forest fires in Canada. That is why it is more important than ever to get prepared and have access to updated information.
Change Canada, our primary goal is to provide Canadians with the information they need to make informed choices and decisions to protect their health, safety, and property. Before and during wildfire events, our meteorologists closely monitor conditions and issue air quality warnings when smoke threatens communities. We provide detailed forecasts on temperature, precipitation, wind, as well as smoke movement and concentrations so that Canadians can stay ahead of rapidly changing conditions during wildfire smoke episodes. We collaborate with emergency management organizations to keep Canadians safe from wildfires. I encourage everyone to stay informed by checking weather and air quality forecasts and alerts regularly. Canadians can access the up-to-date information through canada.ca/weather or by using the WeatherCan mobile app. These tools provide real-time updates, including severe weather alerts and air quality information tailored to your location. L'un des outils les plus importants dont nous disposons.
One of the most important tools that we have is the tool about air quality. It allows Canadians to understand what kind of health impact there can be from air quality. There are recommendations, for instance, when pollution goes up, a recommendation is issued to limit outside activity. Of course, this can become a significant public health issue. At the same time, we know that we can't just be reactive. We need to invest in prevention and resilience.
I'm pleased to announce that the Government of Canada is investing more than $47 million over 5 years to support wildfire preparedness, response, and risk reduction through Parks Canada's National Fire Management Program. This funding will strengthen our readiness by supporting trained wildfire personnel and increasingly nationally deployable equipment. It will also support measures that reduce wildfire risks, such as carefully planned prescribed fires and vegetation management, helping to build on important work to maintain ecosystems and enhance community safety. So far this spring, Parks Canada has conducted 11 prescribed fires, treating 1,882 hectares across 8 national parks and national historic sites to reduce wildfire risks to communities in and around those areas. For example, in Riding Mountain National Park, where prescribed fire is being used to restore grasslands, improve wildlife habitat, and lower the risk of high-intensity wildfires near park facilities and surrounding communities. Parks Canada plays a unique and vital role managing wildfire risks across more than 350,000 square kilometers of federal lands, which include national parks, national historic sites, and communities located within or next to these places. With over a century of experience, their teams are an essential part of Canada's wildlife response network. And as a member of Canada's Interagency Forest Fire Centre, Parks Canada regularly deploys personnel and specialized equipment to support provinces and territories during wildfire events anywhere in Canada. This investment ensures that they can continue protecting people, communities, and some of our most treasured natural spaces while maintaining healthy, resilient ecosystems. Parks Canada will continue working closely with others, including communities, provinces, and territories, as well as Indigenous partners whose knowledge and leadership are critical to effective wildfire management and climate adaptation. Il faut améliorer la résilience climatique.
We need to improve climate resiliency. It is a must. It is through resilience that we will protect lives, that we will save for our communities, and we will have a sustainable, wealthy future. I have one final message. The Government of Canada is ready, and we are working every single day to provide up-to-date information to you, the tools and the supports that you will need to stay safe. So stay well-informed, be ready, and take care of each other. Thank you.
And I'm now going to pass it to Minister Galmasti.
Thank you. Thank you, Wajagumshwe. Bonjour. Hello. I'd like to thank my colleagues for, our session today. I want to first begin today by speaking and acknowledging that there are many First Nations communities that are facing emergencies at this very moment, and there are some who are still responding to the devastating fire season that they endured last year and this winter. I
want to recognize that as we speak, there are communities still living with the consequences of the wildfire season from last year, but also from some incidents that happened over the winter.
From First Nations communities that included 44,000 people from 61 First Nations communities that were displaced in their traditional territories and outside. I think last year's valuable lessons that we were able to attain really spoke to the space of prevention, surge capacity tools being available, and of course collaboration as a major tool across all levels of governments. First Nations families lost their homes. Many were forced from their territories with uncertainty of when they could return home. Many at this time still have not been able to return home. So far this year, there are 15 wildland fires that have impacted 15 First Nations, resulting in the evacuation of 227 people from 4 First Nations, and there are currently 16 evacuees from 2 communities. I really want to take this time to recognize the chiefs, the first responders, the emergency coordinators, and the community leaders and support who continue to protect and support those families during these crisis moments. As we move into another wildfire season, I know that many are feeling worried and uncertain of what's to come. Indigenous Services Canada is working and continuing to work alongside First Nations and our provincial partners to support not only evacuations, preparedness efforts, and safe relocations where communities can determine the supports that are necessary. This is something that I fully support. We must ensure that we are not only reflecting the work in the preparedness space, but also supporting as they go through an evacuation process. Les gouvernements provinciaux et des partenaires comme la Croix
Provincial governments and international partners such as the Red Cross, are also stepping up their efforts. Communities are also encouraged to take advantage of training and equipment for these interventions.
Know their territories and their members in ways that no other groups can. They want to ensure they are at the table and working in the space of understanding how emergencies affect their people, their lands, and their way of life. Their perspectives are not only essential in shaping approaches that are effective, culturally grounded, and responsive to real needs, they are also essential in the work that we are doing across different levels of government. Le travail qu'on fait ensemble est vraiment essentiel.
The work that we together is really essential and an important tool to know what supports exist when your communities are faced with wildfires. It really will be about the people on the ground to take part in that.
It is in moments of crisis, stability and predictability is what matters. That's why we are continuing to work with the program of emergency management assistance. My department covers 100% of the eligible expenses and recovery costs that are incurred by First Nations during emergencies. This includes evacuations, health and support services, education services, and essential services required to keep community members safe. Nous offrons aussi des paiements anticipés.
We also offer advance payment to communities so that they can take quick action without waiting for necessary funding.
My department has provided over $855 million to First Nations communities to respond to emergencies and to support recovery efforts across Canada. In March, I was able to announce an additional $55.6 million for the 26-27 year to support preparedness and prevention, fire smart initiatives, and the vital work of emergency management coordination in First Nations communities. I want to also recognize that we were able to take an important and historic first step. On May 4th, I had the opportunity, while in Prince Edward Island, to sign the first ever multilateral emergency management agreement between Abequit First Nation and the province of Prince Edward Island and Canada. I want to acknowledge the work of Chief Gould, his community, and his council in this space, and for hosting us on this historic event. Cette entente représente un changement fondamental dans la façon de gérer.
This agreement represents a fundamental change in emergency management.
For the first time ever in Canada, First Nations are fully integrated into the provincial and federal emergency management system as an equal partner in planning, preparedness, training, and decision-making right from the outset. Through it, Abequit First Nation will work alongside Prince Edward Island and Indigenous Services Canada to establish a shared annual plan, setting priorities together and determining how to act on them. I support these measures because this is what self-determination looks like. It means that decisions are no longer made for communities, but are made with them and by them. This is a model that I am looking forward to replicate across the country. We believe that this approach is not only safer, stronger, but more efficient, and is essentially a cost-saving tool that ensures that communities are rightfully recognized in this space. To move emergency management forward, First Nations do have to be at the table. They not only bring forward generations of knowledge about their lands, waters, and community members, they are also there to ensure that the management of emergency processes are moved forward expeditiously. To all chiefs, first responders, support workers, emergency coordinators, and community leaders carrying the work in this space, I want to thank you for your commitment in the past and your renewed commitment and courage and leadership as we move forward into this year. As climate emergencies continue to intensify, we know that this commitment must remain strong and clear, that we will continue to work with First Nations, not only in emergency situations, but in the essential and critical work of preparedness, recovery, and the rebuilding that follows. On sera là avec toi jusqu'au bout.
We will be with you until that work is done.
Merci. Thank you.
And hello, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm Corey Hogan. I'm pleased to join you on behalf of Minister Hodgson for NRCan for this important update. I'm joining you from Calgary, from the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. And the city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation within Alberta. So for the past several years, wildfire season has been a significant and in many cases devastating challenge for Canada. Communities across the country, including here in Alberta, have faced prolonged evacuations, lost homes and livelihoods, and tragically, the loss of life. Ces répercussions mettent en évidence une dure réalité. Les risques de feux de forêt ne sont plus un problème occasionnel et ne sont pas près de disparaître. Malheureusement, ils semblent faire partie intégrante de notre avenir au Canada. Un défi que nous devons relever de front pour protéger la population dans toutes les régions du pays. Overall, the start of fire season has been significantly slower than in recent years. However, some wildfires have already affected communities, including right here in my home province of Alberta. Part of Woodlands County was under an evacuation order earlier this month due to an out-of-control wildfire. Additionally, last week in Nova Scotia, Alexandria Uishta, a heroic volunteer firefighter, tragically passed away while responding to a wildfire. Our thoughts are with Alexandra's family, fellow firefighters, and community during this difficult time. Wildfires are becoming more intense and they're becoming more complex, as we've heard. And as the risk grows, so does the importance of working together across provinces and territories with Indigenous partners and local authorities, and with experts in other countries who step in and help us when we need it the most. And across Canada, the federal government's efforts are focused on supporting provincial and territorial response when wildfires strike, while working around the clock to prevent fires before they start, reduce their impact, and support recovery in affected communities. Une grande partie de ces travaux repose sur les données et informations scientifiques essentielles fournies par Ressources naturelles Canada, qui permettent aux Canadiens d'être prêts côté planification, préparation et intervention en cas de feu de forêt. Notre gouvernement a modernisé ces outils afin que les décideurs aient accès plus rapidement à des renseignements plus fiables avant et pendant le pic d'activité de feu de forêt, parce que face à des menaces de cette ampleur, nous ne pouvons pas nous permettre de nous fier à des renseignements qui ne sont pas à jour ou à des équipements désuets. That science is also behind Canada's monthly wildfire outlooks. NRCan forecasting shows that fire danger across Canada is expected to build through July, with British Columbia facing the highest and most sustained fire danger. Additionally, some parts of northern, central, and eastern Canada could see elevated fire danger emerge quickly over the same period. In the last few days, we have begun to see an increase in fire activity in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and the Northwest Territories. We are committed to sharing these forecasts regularly and consistently so Canadians are equipped, knowledgeable, and can prepare if needed. Throughout the season, Canadians can always find updated wildfire forecast information on NRCan's Canada Wildland Fire Information System webpage at cwfis.cfs.nrcan.gc.ca. To strengthen Canada's resilience, we are also supporting wildfire fighter training and helping the provinces and territories buy specialized equipment. To date, our government has supported the training of over 2,000 personnel, including wildland firefighters, structural firefighters, and community wildfire protection trainees. This more than doubles our original goal of training 1,000 firefighters, and we did it 2 years ahead of schedule, because that's the pace we need to move at to protect communities and save lives. Nous avons également conclu des accords avec toutes les provinces et tous les territoires admissibles concernant l'achat de matériel, qui soient des équipements de protection individuelle, des véhicules, des unités mobiles, des toilettes ou des pompes, pour que c'est le courage canadien en première ligne dépose des meilleurs équipements qui soient et puissent intervenir sur le terrain avec que le feu de forêt ne s'intensifie. Further, as we announced earlier this week, through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre, CIFC, we have moved rapidly to secure 12 assets ready for this wildfire season to boost the capacity of provinces and territories to respond during periods of intense wildfire activity. This is something our provincial, territorial, and other partners have been asking for, and we're proud to deliver. So I'll close by recognizing and thanking the brave firefighters, first responders, Indigenous fire stewards, emergency managers, and volunteers like Alexandru who worked tirelessly and put themselves in harm's way to keep their fellow Canadians safe. Votre dévouement, souvent dans des conditions extrêmement difficiles, incarne le véritable sens du mot service. Votre bravoure et votre altruisme nous rend fiers d'être Canadiens, même dans les moments difficiles. To all Canadians watching or listening today, especially those who may be worried about what this season might bring, your federal government will continue to act with urgency to keep your families and communities safe. There is truly no commitment more important. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now turn to questions. We should have about 25 minutes for questions, and we'll start in the room. If you are online, please use the raised hand function, and I will go online once we have finished in the room. We'll start with Alessia Pasafume from the Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister Galmasti. I'm wondering if there's any preparations that were made with the First Nations who were experiencing a lot of wildfires last year, and if there's been any work to kind of smooth out the evacuation process for those communities.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Nice to see you again, Alicia. It has been such a challenging, past 12 months. We do know that Cross Lake was one of the communities that had really been significantly impacted by the wildfire season last year. They also had, the double dose of dealing with, the impact on their infrastructure because of the winter, and now we do know that there was a fire that started within the community territory. I think Chief Monias, who hosted me in a community tour last year, really demonstrated how much his community has prepared. They have a new facility, they have an orientation of how they intend to take care of the equipment that they're, when they're in a period of being at risk. And it really demonstrated in that visit to me, the intimate knowledge that he had of not only his environment, but the expectation of his members for how he wants to take care of them. There was a huge learning experience, I'm going to say, as a first-time minister, not only with the evacuation, but how to support communities this year. And it is not solely within ISK that we're trying to be prepared. Of course, we are there to support communities, offering culturally safe support services, ensuring that members feel that they are safe in the space that they're in, supporting not only them during the evacuation period, but in some instances, some individuals in long-term spaces. One of the I think prerogatives that I have as a minister is to ensure that the preparedness approach that we have is to undertake initiatives where we are not reaching the evacuation window. So I was really pleased when my colleague was able to make the announcement in terms of the new assets that we've attained, the aerial firefighting crafts that are going to be in place. I think that this is one of the things that we saw last year. We needed to have these resources available. I'm very thankful for the decisions that were made in that space. Really, the prevention work is critical. We in the federal are here to respond to surge capacity, but I think that prevention work is critical. And I just have to, once again, really point out that the amazing work that was done in Apakwit First Nations with the multilateral agreement that was signed with their government, that is the kind of tool that you ultimately want to see. And I think that many governments are seeing and learning about this tool. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot more work in that space. I look forward to working with other governments and provinces across the country to be sure that we are coordinating and collaborating.
And with the hope that the answer isn't spring has sprung, that we have like only a few days left in this sitting. What First Nations have been promised clean water legislation in the fall, again in the spring. Are you still committed to meeting that deadline to introduce something before the House rises?
I've had many conversations with the Prime Minister's office over the past few days. We are coordinating. Spring has sprung. Spring is not over. We are not there yet. But you know, it is my intention to do the work in this space. I've had a lot of engagement. I've had a lot of communities reach out to me, leaders reach out to me. We know this work is essential. We know it is absolutely imperative that we support in that infrastructure space. Ultimately, you know, my desire is to ensure that when the water legislation passes, that we can roll out to be sure that communities are prepared with the necessary funds to not only repair infrastructure, to build infrastructure, but to really focus on the maintenance space. This is something, having the capacity to do that work, having water operators in place. You know, there's a lot of good initiatives in the water space that, you know, media doesn't always call attention to, but the water legislation is something critical that's going to drive that. And, you know, I'm looking forward to working not only with leadership, but also the opposition, ensuring that there's that support there. There is that support, not just in terms of what a vote is, but the support to ensure that we are all doing the work in this space. Water, to me, is a nonpartisan issue. It is there to offer the service to First Nations, and they live in every single riding.
Just very quickly, like, so it is coming before the House rises.
Yeah, anticipation. I'm eagerly excited, just as you are.
We'll turn now to Rudy Kachella from the Hill Times.
Today, can you hear me?
Stop to it. Just leave it. Let it go. Press it once.
Okay.
Yeah, there you're good. No, leave it.
Sorry, okay. A report by the municipality of Jasper released last year called for improving coordination between agencies and better defining jurisdictional boundaries, especially concerning wildfires affecting national parks. I wanted to get your thoughts on what has been done to address this and what is the government doing differently this time. Thank you.
So just with respect to the community of Jasper, the phase that we're in right now is the long-term rebuilding phase. And so a lot of really good work has been done in that regard so that we can, there was already a housing shortage, so that we can get people in the community back into housing that's affordable as quickly as possible. With respect to coordination efforts in terms of what happened for the wildfire in Jasper, we know that the coordination could have been better. We know that through some after-action reports and studies that were done, and we have had ongoing and substantial discussions, not just with people at Parks Canada, I mean especially Parks Canada, but also with the mayor of Jasper and other groups that were involved in that effort. And those, we were careful to read all of the after-incident reports and make sure that we're incorporating in how we respond to future events, lessons learned from the Jasper wildfire. Thank you.
This is for Minister Daberson. The Canadian Climate Institute has flagged only recently that Canada is not on track for meeting its emissions targets, and so did Mr. Guilbeault yesterday. This was more of a general question. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you would say to Canadians who will be affected by wildfires and displaced by wildfires this year on the decisions made by a government on climate policies.
Well, there are two parts to that question. I mean, the first part is, what are we telling Canadians about the wildfire season that is upon us? And I want to be very clear, because I think that's a message that you're hearing from all of us, that we are ready and we are making sure that they will have the information and tools to be able to respond to the situations that are that they are met with. So that's my first and primary message for this wildfire season and for Canadians. As far as our work to fight climate change and knowing that we are very much committed to continuing that work, we are working, when you have seen the electricity strategy that we announced last week, we talk about our enhanced methane regulations, when we talk about the work that we're doing to protect nature and biodiversity, the fact that we're actually putting in place many investment tax credits to encourage more investments in not only our electrical grid, but also into clean technologies. There are many places where we are doing the hard work and the work continues. Our commitment is there because we know that Canada must meet our Paris targets, and we're committed to reaching them. We know that the global economy is moving to a low carbon economy, and in order for Canada to be competitive economically, we must move to a low carbon economy. And we know that the future is electrification, and that is where we are working to make sure that we have the infrastructure ready to meet that moment.
Natasha Bolowski, the National Observer.
Hi, yeah, thanks for taking our questions. Mine will be for you, Minister Olszewski, about wildfire response, specifically like our Type 3 wildfire fighting capacity. We know that when provinces and territories have exhausted, their local resources, they often will put in a request to the federal government, and that often ends up landing with the Canadian Armed Forces to, help either with evacuations or that Type 3 firefighting that they aren't necessarily specialized to do. And so I'm just wondering, especially, has your government, do you have a number to quantify the gap in terms of the personnel and equipment that we need to do that Type 3 wildfire fighting? Corey mentioned that there's been 1,000 new firefighters trained, but what is the gap that you're actually trying to fill so that we have a sense of how far those 1,000, trained people go to filling the gap?
So I'll answer the question first, and then if Corey has any comments to add, I would invite him to do so. But from my perspective, I don't have a hard number with respect to filling that gap, because we are, in terms of Type 3 wildfire fighting, we're surge capacity there as well. And what we've found over the last year is that provinces and territories have worked really hard to increase their own on-the-ground capacity. And so, what we do in response, we don't want to duplicate the good work that they're doing, but we need to be there if response is exceeded. So what's happened in the past is where that local capacity is overwhelmed, it's been necessary for us to call on the Canadian Armed Forces to do Type 3 wildfire fighting. And that's just simply not a sensible use of defense resources. And so we are in ongoing discussions with our humanitarian workforce people, people like the search and rescue people who have indicated a willingness to step into that space and help us train further Type 3 wildfire fighters. So I can tell you that is something that I'm actively working on at the present time, although, as I say, I don't have a number with respect to what that capacity might be at this point. Thank you. Corey, anything to add?
I'd only add a couple things. One is we've actually trained 2,000, so we're 1,000 ahead of our 1,000 target, and that is in part because of the things what the Minister Olszewski was talking about. We're working well with other jurisdictions. We're working well across CIFC to both identify needs and identify opportunities. And I want to underline that, because one of the things that this training provides is the ability to fire smart communities and head off the most damaging consequences of fire can cause. So that's an ever-shifting target. What do we need? When do we need it? As we've talked about, this is, for example, a fire season that is coming in currently at 5% of where we normally are at this time of year. But situations change rapidly. The frontiers change rapidly. The nature of the forest is ever shifting as climate change takes effect. And so it's something we watch. It's why that fire information that we provide and that environmental data that is provided by Minister DeBruze's department is so important as we actively monitor this situation.
Thank you. And you know, like you said, this year is off to a slower start, but that can change. I'm wondering, given that it takes time to build capacity, both with these partner organizations and at the local level, you know, if there is a surge of activity, like where will you be looking first to get that type 3 firefighting equipment and expertise? I know in the past, sometimes that's looked like international requests for aid. Like what's sort of the contingency plan, given that it takes a while to ramp up that expertise locally?
There is some expertise already. The search and rescue people and others in the humanitarian workforce have some capacity already. Although I've said that we don't want to use the armed forces, that is a last resort for us as well. So if we were unable to get, if we weren't able to move, so let me just step back a bit so that it's more clear. We can move people from one province to another, and that's certainly a way. And that's the way that the system works, is in terms of capacity. If a province is having low fire activity, they will absolutely send people to another province in need, and that's the way the system always works. So we'll start with that, and then add to that what capacity we can get from our search and rescue people, and then as an additional layer over that, we have as a last resort, Canadian last resort, the armed forces. And we have our international firefighters as well. And we have agreements with a number of countries, as you know, to provide international firefighters. And so, you know, there is a plan in place with respect to surge capacity for Type 3 firefighting.
Fraser Needham, APTN.
This question is for Minister Galmasti. So you mentioned the agreement signed recently with Prince Edward Island and the First Nations there. Just looking at some of these fires have been all over the country in recent years, but often it's the prairie provinces that are hit the worst. So Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta. Just wondering if the government is in discussions with those provinces and First Nations there about signing similar agreements or close to an agreement similar to what was signed in Prince Edward Island.
Thank you, Fraser. Nice to see you as well. First, I want to touch a little bit on what the multilateral agreement is. Like I said, it is the first of its kind. A lot of work went into this space. I think a good relationship between the First Nation and the provincial government, it was really a driving factor in this space. It looks at planning to response for recovery, but it's also something that allows for First Nations to be part of the system. They are triggered. They are part of the table when the emergency situation is triggered. I think that this is a really great model. In my engagements this year, I've had the opportunity to, you know, showcase this. This was just recently, but showcase what this work is with some of my counterparts and colleagues across the country. I'm really thinking that, you know, those provinces who have the interest, I am more than willing and open to have conversations in this space and really sit down and talk about how can we align better. I think, you know, today's announcement really focuses on preparedness and outlook, and this type of agreement allows for that to be seamless when First Nations are involved and at the table. So we are continuing to do the work. It's only been a few short weeks since this agreement was signed, but I'm there and fully intending to, you know, have those conversations with provinces during my summer engagements on all of the files that we're working on. But preparedness is one of the things that's at the top of the list. It is a huge space that we do work in. It's an incredibly important one because we know that, you know, with climate changing, with the season intensifying when emergencies happen, it is very often First Nations that are at the forefront of, you know, enduring emergencies in that space.
And just as a follow-up, I just wanted to move to evacuations. We covered a lot of stories last year that the evacuations were somewhat chaotic as to who was taking the lead, and then of course they were very lengthy. And one of the complaints is that families were separated in different parts of the country. Some as far away, like in Manitoba, people are in Ontario and things like that. Has there been any improvements there of how evacuations might be handled for First Nations?
Thank you. You know, last year was exceptionally extreme in terms of how evacuations were undertaken. They were not only on a scale of where they were multiple, they were also at a scale of they were exceeding the capacity of being able to be placed in hotels. I'm really proud of the work that Minister Olszewski has been doing in terms of the preparedness angle of how we're supporting in that space. But I also want to say that, you know, I want to acknowledge that the relationship between provinces that were able to receive evacuees across borders, sometimes like it was a 10-kilometer the border and they were going to those spaces, was really, really important. It showed support. Some you know, in some places the province was really, really pushing to work with us, really pushing to ensure that we were involved in the process. In some spaces, you know, province was really trying to ensure that they had the lead and the handle on it, working with their communities. So it was a spectrum across the country, a lot of opportunity for learning. And to me, it showed really the three components that I spoke about earlier, which was the need for prevention in this space, the need for coordination and collaboration in this space, and enhancing the surge capacity tools. I also think that there's a little bit more work that needs to be done in this space, because when individuals are evacuating, very often they're going to evacuation centers, they're going to hotels. I've received this year many proposals from First Nations that have interest in working in this space and creating culturally safe evacuation spaces. And I've even seen, you know, the example of communities that are creating evacuation centers to receive other First Nations into their territory. So there's a lot of, I guess, you know, creativity in trying to build solution there. And it is my hope, while we know that, you know, there's a projection of what the season is going to look like, that there is, you know, a lot of valuable learning that we're going to enact, and that things will, you know, be more responsive and to the needs of those individuals that are, you know, facing evacuation.
I'll just really I'll add briefly to Minister Galmasti's comments. I held a number of roundtables over the past months with our humanitarian workforce people. Those are people like the Salvation Army, like the Canadian Red Cross, who played such a key role in evacuations. And we went through a lessons learned with them as well, and had significant discussions about how we can improve how we do our evacuations. So that's one point. And, you know, we know in terms of Indigenous evacuations that, you know, that we need to pay so much more attention to whether they're, so that they're culturally appropriate, that we don't evacuate to the wrong place where people are put in danger. So we've spent a lot of time and effort talking about that, and figuring out how we can do that in a much better way. In the short to medium term, my goal is to add some Indigenous humanitarian workforce components. So that's something separate from the agreement that the minister is saying is put in place with PEI. This is where, for communities that don't have that kind of agreement, then you know, we need a way to step in to help with evacuations there. And so looking at Indigenous humanitarian workforce groups is something that's absolutely on my radar, and we're having discussions about that now. And then just in terms of what Minister Galmasti said about evacuation centres, at our provincial and territorial meetings, of which I have a number a year to talk about wildfire response and readiness, as well as other disasters, we talked about pre-positioning evacuation centres, and that's something that we're working on in conjunction with a number of provinces, is a plan for where some set evacuation centres could be, so that they are ready, that they're an appropriate size. If we were able to put those evacuation centres in place, our humanitarian workforce, people like the Red Cross, could also pre-plan, knowing that these are the 2 or 3 locations in a province or territory where the evacuations would likely take place. So we're working on a number of things proactively to make sure that we do the best possible job that we can in terms of evacuations, which are, of course, horrible for any Canadian that has to undergo that, and we understand that.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions in the room and then 2 online in French. So I'm hoping we can maybe keep the questions and answers very brief so we can get through them before we have to leave. Ian Bailey from the Globe and Mail.
For Minister Olszewski and also for Corey Hogan on the Alberta sovereignty. Is there a plan in place for making the case for Canada in this sovereignty question akin to what was done in 1995 with Quebec, or are you just making the case as you go along? And is this a debate primarily for Albertan MPs or a debate that has to involve outsiders to Alberta coming in to make the case as well?
Well, I think it's a question that needs to be dealt with by Albertans, of course. But of course, it's a bigger issue. It's the unity of our country, and so we need as many voices as possible to be heard on this issue and step up in support of Canada. And in terms of, I don't want to speak for anyone else at this point, but in terms of our government's plan, and certainly the plan with respect to provincial ministers and MPs is continue to do the hard work to show that Alberta is a respected and valued part of the country, and that to show that we're working hard for Albertans, and to show that for Alberta to remain in Canada is what they should be, is what we want them to do, of course. We want them to understand that being part of this beautiful country is an important thing for Albertans. And so, yeah.
So of course, this is new. Last week was when the Premier of Alberta put the question onto the ballot for October 19th. Of course, it's not the first time any of us have thought about it. Of course, there are conversations ongoing. And look, I'll say a couple things. One is that the best defense for a government always, for Canadians always, is just doing the hard work, making Canada work for every corner of this country. And we're doing that. We're strengthening the economy. We're strengthening our environmental measures. We are defending ourselves in a very turbulent world. We're diversifying trade. Non-US trade is up 40%, for example. And we're reaching these goals by working together. You look at the actions the Prime Minister has taken, for example, the Alberta-Canada Implementation Agreement that's now out here. We're taking strong action on carbon pricing, strong action on methane, strong action on carbon capture, and strong economic action is coming out of that as well. And we're finding ways that we can all work together to reach all of our goals. We're making the country work. And that's sort of job number one here. But is this just for Albertans, you asked as well? And I would say, I agree with Eleanor. It is primarily a question for Albertans, but it is not just a question for Albertans. Albertans are from everywhere. The right of Canadians to be Albertans is at stake in any conversation like this too. This is about your rights as well across the country. And, we are one country, and it's important that people work together to remind each other of that as we go. So look, much more to come on this. We've already begun conversations on all of this. I think as a nation, and certainly as an Alberta caucus, we have not been quiet. But yeah, we're facing something pretty wild, and it's only 144 days away.
Is whether or not we would welcome that. Absolutely, we would welcome that.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the audio. It didn't get onto Zoom.
Would you welcome other premiers coming into the province to make the pitch to? Would you welcome?
I'm sorry, still.
He's asking whether you would welcome other premiers to come into Alberta to make the case for Canada to be united.
I mean, we're Albertans. We welcome everybody. That's kind of our thing.
Sorry, I'm not sure why Ian's microphone suddenly stopped working. We have one more question in the room, and then we'll go online for one question in French, if that's okay. Nick Murray, the Canadian Press.
Hi, my question's for Minister Debrusin from your committee appearance earlier this morning. I know we're here for wildfires, but you did say that I could find you here. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, cool. Earlier in committee, you'd said that the biggest reduction in emissions will be the electricity strategy. And so I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that or clarify it, particularly how it jives with comparison to the emissions reductions from industrial carbon pricing.
anybody, am I allowed to just shout? Does that work, or do you need?
The mic in the middle will be too low.
Okay, I'm gonna go and teamwork makes the dream work over here. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so that was in response to some specific kind of questions about nature strategy and emissions. So industrial carbon pricing is clearly an important part of how we reduce emissions. In the context of conversation, I was also talking about electricity strategy and electrification of our economy being a very important part. That's about doubling our electrical grid. And it's also not it's about the reason we're doubling our electrical grid, which is the electrification of industry, of buildings, of transportation. That is actually how we decarbonize our economy. So they're actually interconnected. So I was responding to a question that was a little bit slightly different, but to be clear, we have many tools that we need to reduce emissions across our country. That it does include industrial carbon pricing, but electrification of our economy is central to it as well.
Okay, so just to kind of be absolutely clear then, because in French you said le plus grand réduction, which means the biggest reduction in emissions. And so were you saying that policy in particular will have the largest emission reductions of any policy the government's saying, or were we saying that le plus grand as far as comparing it to the nature strategy? Again, I'm trying to get an understanding on.
Sorry, and I do think that, so because the question was in reference, to the nature strategy as well. So I was talking about, but industrial carbon pricing still a central piece of how we reduce emissions. But electrification, and all of that, by the way, does move us towards the electrification of our economy. That is what we need to do.
Okay, we're going to quickly go online for a question in French. Simon Jusset from Radio-Canada. Go ahead, Simon.
Oui, bonjour, merci de prendre ma question. J'aurais voulu une réponse en français, s'il vous plaît, avec un petit focus sur la Colombie-Britannique. 2023 a été une grosse année de feu en Colombie-Britannique. Est-ce qu'on peut s'attendre à une saison 2026 dans la norme, ou est-ce que la saison pourrait être semblable à celle de 2023 en raison notamment du phénomène El Niño?
Yeah, maybe Corey, you could answer that en français, s'il vous plaît.
Je peux essayer. I think I would actually have difficulty answering that in French in a cogent fashion. I apologize. I will have to practice more. It is, I don't know, do you want to take a crack at that in French then, Julie?
C'est plutôt que peut-être si on peut avoir la question, parce que, pardon, pour moi, faire la traduction, je ne suis pas capable de faire le bon traduction.
So I might not be able to interpret properly for Eleanor, but it should be her really answering this question because it has to do with wildfires in BC. If someone wants me to interpret, so we have interpreters.
There you go.
Oh, for the question, no.
He wants a French response, which I would be able to give the response. I just don't know the answer. It would be Eleanor
Can
who.
you translate the question?
Yes, okay. He would like to know if the 2026 wildfire season is going to be similar to the 2023 wildfire season, specifically in British Columbia.
It's difficult for me to give an exact answer with respect to that question because it is a wait-and-see question. Like, we're expecting significant wildfire activity in the province of British Columbia, and especially in the month of July. But that said, there are so many factors that can change how that forecast will come to be. And so, this is all about preparedness and response this morning, and we should just be prepared for the worst, I think, at all times. We need to be fully prepared, and that means across all of the capabilities, like that means in terms of detection, in terms of suppression, being ready for evacuations, being ready for recovery. We need to be ready for all of those things. And, I think that's really all I can say about the forecasting at this point. But maybe I'll just add this. As the season progresses, we will be getting operational updates, and we'll be getting information from a number of sources, including ECCC, including NRCan, including the Government Operations Center. And as we go through the season, we provide these updates as we're doing today. And that information will also be available on the public safety website, and as well as the other sites that Corey mentioned. And so there's a lot of places for Canadians across the country, including those from British Columbia, to get information about risk in their communities. Thank you. Great question.
Je pense que je vais juste répondre à la question vraiment en
Une
français.
question de suivi, merci, peut-être un peu moins technique et qui concerne davantage le financement du
Est-ce que je
fédéral.
pourrais juste en premier avant que tu poses ta deuxième question?
Can I just add some elements before you ask your follow-up question? I think we had some technical difficulties in the room. So the answer from my colleague was to say that today's objective is really about being prepared and making sure that everyone, including in BC, know that we are probably headed into a month of July that might have these kinds of incidents. But throughout the year, throughout the summer, we will be getting more information from the different resources, such as NRCan, the Government Operations Center, from Minister Debrussen's office, and also from public safety. And we would like to reassure people in BC that we are keeping an eye on all of these sources of information, and we'll see what the situation evolves into during the summer. But the message here is to be prepared. It's not just preparation either. It's about detecting fires, suppressing fires as soon as they break out, and also putting more effort in recovery for areas that are impacted.
Mr. Galmasty, this is going to have to end our press conference today as the ministers have to leave. So thank you so much. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Technical worker?